As I drift through the cosmos, my direction uncertain, my senses dulled, my pen calling to me once more, all I see in every direction is mid.
Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland exists to fill a gap in HAL's schedule. Around the same time, they were managing the Kirby anime under the directorship of Masahiro Sakurai, and they didn't yet have a game on the books to coincide with its release. A game born from the womb of the free market. What we get then is Kirby's adventure with a new coat of paint. There's an uncanny effect produced by recreations like this. That NES foundation peeks out from beneath the veneer of originality. It does not carry forward the innovations to the copy system made in Superstar. It can't carry those forward. That base was never built to support it. To change it would be to change the core of Kirby's adventure. Yet, in other ways, it does alter that core. Kirby's Adventure was a cutting-edge NES release. It had bright colors and blocky geometry, with a few animated background elements. It was the kind of style that could sell you on sentient trees and areas called grape gardens. It was all nonsense. Caves with squares everywhere, towers with indoor fountains, and cylindrical hills with checkerboard patterns. It was a mix of Mario and Sonic, sculpting an ethereal dreamscape of pleasant vibes. Nightmare in Dreamland is far more detailed. Its backgrounds are hand-drawn paintings. Platforms and obstacles are given a more grounded texture. They sit in stark contrast to the abstract stylings of the hub levels, which look more or less like the NES version. The hubs resembling that version is its own kind of flex, briefly showing players what this could have been before you step through the door and land in another realm entirely. It's a tremendous visual overhaul to a decade-old skeleton, so much so that it became Kirby's de facto look for most of this period, as they were likely eager to reuse as many assets as they could. Gotta keep pumping out games. By their own admission, this was a title that came into existence to fill a market void. Many remakes flounder around in that product space, making it difficult to divine meaning from them as their own works. Comparing Adventure and Superstar is like night and day. Part of that comes down to the hardware, but I also think there was a concerted effort to push past the limits of what Kirby was capable of. Comparing Adventure and Superstar through their 2000s remakes on the GBA and DS respectively, there was a rather narrow visual gap, but a bit of a wider scope gap. Ostensibly, they follow the same franchise philosophy, introducing Kirby's history to a new audience in a form factor which conforms to a newly established brand identity. Many of their changes come in the form of additions or remixes to existing modes. Nightmare in Dreamland has new sub-games, a co-op multiplayer mode, and an unlockable extra mode where you play as Meta Knight. It is not an essential unlockable, he barely has an impact. Again, Kirby's Adventure is not allowed to change, so Meta Knight fights Meta Knight, I guess. Meta Nightmare Ultra is functionally the same. You speedrun your way through all the sub-games. Only difference is, this mode accounts for his existence. There are additional cutscenes, added abilities, and a whole new final boss. Despite playing through all of the same sub-games, Meta Knight's new abilities change how they all feel. Speed boosts will help you rocket through the platforming bits, while the Twister move will kill bosses quicker. You need to juggle those costs to get through the mode as quickly as possible. Spend too many points and you might be shy of a screen nuke, which could have saved you more time in the long run. Meta Nightmare Ultra remixes Superstar rather than repackaging it, and it's not the only mode that does it. Spring Breeze gets a revamped difficulty mode called Revenge of the King, with a couple new boss fights to call its own. The True Arena created its own tradition, with a remix of the Mark's boss fight in the form of Mark's Soul, a brutal fight at the end of an even harder gauntlet of every boss in its hardest incarnation. These modes added to Superstar feel like they could have been in a sequel to the original, messing with its core elements to create something new in a way that Nightmare in Dreamland only ever manages on a surface level. Shinya Kumazaki's fingerprints are all over this one. He has a reverence for Kirby's history that oozes from his projects. Superstar Ultra is described in the 20th anniversary booklet as basically a new game. Spring Breeze was adjusted to be a little easier to compensate for the harsher difficulty in the additional modes. Milky Way Wishes and the Great Cave Offensive fit snugly onto the DS, where they could use the second screen to display information. It's a new addition, building on top of it with a sense of purpose. It's the kind of energy Kumazaki would breathe into the Kirby games in the future, but we aren't quite there yet. I don't say this to rag on Nightmare in Dreamland. Might not do as much as Superstar Ultra, but the same was true of Adventure and Superstar. There was a colossal shift in variety and complexity when jumping to the SNES. Their remakes simply embody a similar energy, and Superstar Ultra did steal the Meta Nightmare mode. They had to be doing something right. Meta Knight being such an obscure unlockable here is a little more interesting than in Superstar Ultra, where it kind of just opens at a certain point. Nightmare in Dreamland has you 100%ing the game and playing the hard mode for Meta Knight, and nothing really tells you that he's gonna be there. Would have blown my mind as a kid, the same way Metal Sonic did in Sonic Adventure on GameCube. It's nothing more than a skin swap, but that shit's cool. Genuine gaming mysteries feel like a dime a dozen in an age where we can crack these babies open and learn them inside and out. I grew up playing the shit out of Superstar Ultra. For a while, I didn't even know it was a remake. Traveling back to Superstar on the SNES, I was shocked to learn that some of my favorite childhood modes hadn't existed before the DS. I don't think anyone would argue I didn't get the Superstar experience as a kid, even if it was the souped-up version. Some of my most treasured gaming memories are of playing this in co-op with a friend of mine using download play. I thought it was awesome you could do the whole thing in co-op. That might be why Nightmare in Dreamland reads to me as a bit mediocre. I didn't grow up with it, and I wasn't able to utilize its intriguing co-op multiplayer features. Maybe if I did, I would have been humming to a different tune. I'm sure those of you who grew up with it do. At the very least, I'm glad it happened, because Superstar Ultra set the stage for a style of remake that's a little more my speed.
Call for backup. You can call on the powers of your new friends, unlock puzzles, defeat enemies, and gain new abilities in Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. Rated E for everyone.
It was initially difficult to get a read on Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. A Kirby Metroidvania sounds pretty cool, like a full game extension of the Great Cave Offensive. In classic Kirby fashion, you need specific power-ups to open shortcuts. Those power-ups might be nearby, or they might be in another world. Remembering where certain copy abilities can be found is key to progression, as this is a Metroidvania without permanent upgrades, and that results in a much less restrictive playthrough. Amazing Mirror could be described as a bunch of traditional Kirby levels all strung together, branching off into their own tangents. It is possible to beeline for the 8 mirror shards if you know what you're doing. Other pathways contain chests with unlockable music, skins, and extra lives. It's hard for these paths not to feel like wastes of time, especially the random goal games that can force you out of whatever world you're currently knee-deep in. Worlds are bridged by shortcut buttons you unlock, so if you never manage to find one and end up at a goal game, you'll be trekking back to the world on foot. Its level design is confusing and slapdash. Half the time I ended up at the main boss room by bumbling around and stumbling into progression. It's an interesting haze of Kirby game feel. There are cannons to light and blocks to break. You're always on the cusp of a Kirby platformer, until you get lost in World 9's maze of looping doors. The map tries its best to be useful, but often entrances and exits are confusingly placed. Sometimes you can enter a room from 2 different places. It's not always clear that you'll be running into a potential dead end. Lord help you if you're trying to reach the map square. Hope you enjoy feeling your way around in the darkness. I was oddly unsatisfied on that first playthrough. It felt a little more like a set of loose Kirby levels I could complete in any order. Amazing Mirror is a bit aimless in that way, as you drift from world to world with no clear direction. The Great Cave Offensive had a linear direction to follow, with areas that had many routes to explore and secrets to find. It was harder to get lost when you were engaging with each area one at a time in a clear order. Amazing Mirror explodes off from a central world. World 5 is to the west, World 2 to the east, 4 to the north, 3 to the south. There's a world in every major direction, and the connective tissue between them was tough to uncover. I remember finding a shortcut from World 2 to World 6. It involved solving a challenging timing-based puzzle, which was satisfying up until the point where I discovered that I had to open it from the other side as well. I do not understand why you would ever feel the need to do this, since by the time you reach World 6, you'll likely already have the necessary shortcuts to take you into that world from the hub anyway. See, these problems I was brushing up against were likely a result of my first playthrough being a solo jaunt. My AI-controlled companions were dead weight. They barely attempt to solve puzzles with you, they're next to useless in combat, and are liable to fly off in another direction the moment you call them over. I may as well have been playing this baby alone, and as a single-player Metroidvania, it was underwhelming. And there's the twist. This is not a single-player Metroidvania. It is a co-op, multiplayer Kirby game. After that first playthrough leaving me unfulfilled, I asked some good friends to hop on NSO and give it a whirl. Huge thank you to Liam Triforce and his brother Daylight for coming together to make this happen. If I'm honest, I did not expect this to change my perspective very much. It seemed so unfocused for basically no potential gain. I was looking at a messy, boring Kirby game that might have been a little more tolerable with a few friends. Turns out, multiplayer's the final piece of the puzzle. It transformed the game into something pretty special. It has quickly risen from what I would comfortably call mid into maybe one of my favorite GBA games. From the moment you drop into the world, all of these disconnected frustrations click into place. Each player has their own stock of lives, and there's some hefty input delay while in co-op. It's a process in itself to wrangle control back from that lag, and it leads to a lot of lives being lost in the process. Goal games were nice to discover since they were a wellspring for health recovery and life gain in a much more difficult playthrough than the breezy single-player mode. Calling friends will give the boss fights more health, but you'll almost need them if you aren't used to the input delay paired with the adventure system of losing your power-up in a single hit. Whether or not this should have been the system they ran with is irrelevant to me, because what this all creates is a much more challenging Kirby game that requires cooperation to punch through. When you have friends with you, everyone gets to go off in different directions and fill out the map much quicker. We often had moments where we'd reconvene and discuss what we'd found to hash out a plan for what we're going to do next. We'd call out if there was food nearby we could share, or lives to pick up for those who might be low. That shortcut into World 6 I discussed earlier suddenly made a lot more sense. It wasn't designed so that a single player would unlock it. It was designed so that upon discovering the shortcut, you could get your friends to go open the other side of the gate. Now, exploration's a communal effort. Finding a shortcut button helps everyone. Rooms with multiple doors aren't nearly as intimidating when you can call up a friend and have them take the other door to scout for information. We ripped through the game in about 4 hours this way. It really flew by. It's still bewildering that a GBA game this expansive allowed every player the ability to go wherever they wanted. Certainly it buckles under that weight sometimes when too much is happening on screen. That makes it even more endearing though. Flagship, the company behind the Oracle games, and Dimps, who worked on the Sonic Advance games, were really punching above their weight here. Their collaboration led to a game about collaboration. In a franchise where friendship is power, it's quite fitting that this title is best experienced with company. I can't force you not to play this in single player, but if you haven't yet played it, heed my warning and gather some friends up. If you don't have any and you're really curious, go ahead. I can't stop you. If my 10 years worth of writing means anything to you though, do it with friends. If you cannot get anyone to play it with you, perhaps it's simply not the right time to play Amazing Mirror. There's so many other games out there to play that I don't think there's much shame in leaving it aside until you're able to experience it as it was intended. There's a time and a place for every work out there.
Kirby knows, if you can't beat 'em, eat 'em! Chew up the competition with Kirby as he jets through 3 gut-busting game modes and over 20 chaotic courses in Kirby Air Ride. Prepare for fast and furious racing action as Kirby hits Warp Star speed. You can even battle your friends in one of 3 hyper game modes.
If you can't beat 'em, eat 'em. If you can't beat 'em, eat 'em.
Kirby Air Ride, only on Nintendo GameCube.
Kirby Air Ride is not only my favorite racing game, it is also my favorite work by Masahiro Sakurai. I have not played Kid Icarus Uprising or the award-winning Meteos for DS, so I'm letting you know that this could change if I ever play those. For now though, Kirby Air Ride holds the crown. There's a pretty common narrative which surrounds this game, that everything in it, except for City Trial, kinda sucks. I can see where this comes from. 9 maps for the main racing modes, a bit of a low count compared to Mario Kart or F-Zero on the same console. It's also explicit about the fact that it only uses a single button to control everything. So surely that means it can't match the depth of other racers. I don't quite agree with this notion. It is true that Air Ride's controlled with a single button, but your whole mode of play changes depending on the machine you choose. The Warp Star has a pretty standard drift arc when you hold down the A button, different from the Nebula Star, which has a faster top speed, but loses more from a drift. The Slick Star doesn't even have a drift arc, it will simply slide in the direction it was already moving while maintaining its speed until you let go of the drift. The Swerve Star comes to a dead stop, giving you full control over your direction. These are simply differences in how they all drift. Wheelie bikes cannot glide, but they get big jumps and automatically run over boost panels. Boost panels interact with the Rocket Star in a different way as well, allowing you to reach your top speed without needing to sit there and slowly charge up to maximum like you'd normally need to. This is the first distinction. Your choice of machine changes everything about your approach to a race. One of the problems I've had with Mario Kart is that its stats only really matter in very minor ways. Your kart will control slightly differently based on its drift pattern, acceleration, and off-road. Those changes will never be substantial enough for it to make much of a difference to anyone but seasoned pros, and it inevitably means everyone will end up picking the exact same combination. At that point, I'd rather the customization options be purely cosmetic. In Air Ride, those changes are different playstyles. If you want a sense of normalcy, choose the Warp Star. If you're confident in your track knowledge, you can pick the Swerve Star. On tracks with a lot of long corridors and turns, the Slick Star might be a good choice. Maybe you want to make use of a track with a lot of ledges, so you pick the Jet Star for the speed boosts it'll get by chaining takeoffs. Any given track will have a completely different optimal route based on your machine choice. Some machines want to be in the air, some are better at banking sharp turns, and some just want to chain boost panels. That's before even mentioning the copy system, which functions like items in Mario Kart. You'll use sword, plasma, fire, frost, and other abilities to disrupt your opponents. But as with the machines, this is not the only use for these abilities. Wheel and Fly act as transformations to whichever machine you're using, potentially changing how you interact with the track for a few seconds. Wheel acts a little more like a wheelie bike, and Fly acts more like a wing star. In tracks where these abilities are common, you can use them to make up for your potential weaknesses. You can also use these copy abilities to defeat enemies strewn across the track. Upon defeat, you'll be granted a decent burst of speed with the same properties as a boost panel. Paired with the draft you receive for trailing a racer ahead of you, mopping up enemies can be a legitimately strong comeback mechanic in the right hands. In races, this can be a little more chaotic since they spawn in random spots every race, but in time attack, their position is fixed. Tracks are actually designed so that you need to treat each lap differently depending on where the enemies are laid out, once again transforming each track based on which machine you use. If you want a normal time attack experience without any enemies to worry about, you can do free run, which is an endless mode where every lap, a ghost of your best lap time will appear, allowing you to compare minor strat alterations in real time to see how it affects your overall lap performance. It's a fantastic feature that I wish more racers had, if they don't already. I'm sure I'm about to get a ton of comments on that one. Educate me, my minions. There's quite a lot more juice in this mode than people would have you believe. I do get why this would be intimidating for players used to Mario Kart. That game's relatively simple to understand, whereas Air Ride tends to feel nonsensical. The text blurbs explaining how each of the machines work don't do a terribly good job illustrating their nuances, or how you're supposed to use them effectively. I don't blame anyone for not understanding that the Rocket Star does not need to be charged manually every single time you lose speed, and that boost panels can substitute the long charge times. I only picked that stuff up through experimentation and a lot of research into time attack runs. Speedwriter.show88.com is a fantastic resource for this kind of information, by the way. It has every world record for every track with every machine, so you can compare which ones work better for which tracks. Through this, you'll begin to realize there are clear favorites among the roster, and that's to be expected. There's a trick you can perform with the wheelie bike, which makes it the objectively correct choice for speed runs on almost all tracks, except Sky Sands and Magma Flows. This is where things get interesting. The Rocket Star is actually better on Magma Flows, since it has a ton of boost panels to maintain its ludicrous top speed. It's funny, when you start out with Air Ride, it's a fairly slow racer. You'll lose control of your machine occasionally, or get a quick burst from boost panels, but it tends to feel fairly basic at first. Then you go watch speed runs and players are cracking the sound barrier in ways that are enchanting. Jetstar is superior on Sky Sands, since it has a lot of small ledges to exploit. This machine gets a big boost both from flying off a ledge and landing on the ground from flight, so you can chain the various sand piles and dunes for a ton of boosts. It's so different from the Slick Star run, which uses more copy abilities to hit enemies while it holds its drift to cut corners much earlier. It's common to see the Slick Star start drifting a whole hallway before the turn, since it does not lose speed when you hold down the A button. You can rocket through boost panels while priming yourself for the upcoming drift. It's my favorite machine to use on Frozen Hillside. Track knowledge is even more key on this machine since you often need to react quickly to turns. The Power Stars average in every stat, which is cool because that means it needs to use copy abilities to compensate. So the basic Warp Star plays the most like a typical Kirby game, where he's kinda useless without his copy abilities. How does the Bulk Star fare then? As a kid, this was the machine nobody touched. None of us understood it. It does have one of the lower times on Sky Sands, owing to its sharper turns. You might think it's an awful machine then, but all you have to do is switch tracks. On tracks like Nebula Belt and Fantasy Meadow, which are much more straightforward, it's one of the best performing machines. This is where I learned more about how the Bulk Star actually works. One of the reasons it feels like it sucks on the ground is because it can only reach a certain amount of top speed without other factors, sorta like the Rocket Star. You'll need more air time since your charged engine does not deplete while you're in the air, but you'll still gain speed. This means that as long as you have a ledge, you can reach even higher speeds using the extra acceleration you'll get from essentially slowing down the engine's decline. Of course, this means it's highly dependent on having a lot of those opportunities. It does pretty well on tracks with lots of boost panels too, like Checker Knights and Magma Flows. Unfortunately, this does mean that many machines need their track to be any good, and some machines don't even have one. The Winged Star and Wagon Star underperform in normal races due to their gimmicks not adapting well to course design. Aside from its flight, the Winged Star has horrible stats in almost all areas. This means it needs to be in the air at all times, but this airspeed is not comparable to the same bonuses wheelies get from boost panels and other such specialties. Not to mention, staying in the air is easier said than done. Tracks like Beanstalk Park have really frustrating invisible ceilings that prevent the kind of height gliding machines were built for, and I wish more courses leaned into what makes the Winged Star special. The wagon cannot charge boost, but makes up for it with heightened jump capabilities and much more straightforward handling. That basically means it trades less traditional controls for a worse machine in almost all areas. They both do good on Nebula Belt since there are easy ways to chain wheel through the random tiles on the floor, essentially making them wheelie bikes in disguise. Nebula Belt kinda sucks. I still don't know why this was the unlockable track. Feels more like a beta course. For regular races, I'm not really certain how a Winged Star is supposed to catch up to a wheelie bike, even with the copy abilities and drafting. Drafts are actually pretty impressive in Air Ride compared to Mario Kart. You can activate one pretty far away from the machine in front of you, and it seems to give you a significant boost. It's just not going to help you if an opponent gets a breakaway lead. That's assuming, of course, you play with a group of pros, and not simply a room of other casuals, which is the kind of experience you're going to realistically get. I am curious to see how Air Riders fares with online play if it has a similar balancing problem. Still, it's a drawback that feels like a natural byproduct of designing Air Ride like a Smash Bros. Game, where every machine pick is its own game. There were bound to be outliers, especially given that the design phase of Air Ride only lasted about 3 months after all the assets were created. Plus, this is the core foundation that's part of what makes City Trial so legendary, as it essentially flips everything I've just explained on its head. In this mode, you use the same machines, but everyone starts in a hub level on an incredibly weak compact star, before riding around to find new machines, as well as pick up patches that boost your stats. Everyone then participates in a stadium match at the end, which can range from hitting a target board of points, beating the shit out of each other, or doing a lap of an air ride track. The variance in this mode is out of this world. It prophesied what would eventually become the Battle Royale boom, and likely explains why I fell into that style of game so hard when it first hit the scene. Collecting patches has a noticeable increase on your machine's performance. Boosts give you more speed off boosts, charge decreases your charge time, glide allows you to be in the air longer, top speed increases your speed cap. All of these make a lot of sense, but then you get to patches like weight, offense, and defense. See, these machines were not created specifically for the air ride mode. Some of them, like the wagon, which performs horribly in the racing mode, are very valuable in City Trial since they have a lot of health and defense, making them harder to kill. The racing mode only has health bars if you turn it on in the options menu, morphing your race into an experience more akin to F-Zero, where killing opponents is encouraged. This works a lot better as a default setting in City Trial, as breaking your opponent's machine means they'll lose a ton of their patches, and will need to run around on foot to find another machine. It's also easier to kill opponents with the items exclusive to City Trial, like time bombs you hide in the ground, and giant Gordos you can throw. On top of there being demolition derbies in the pool of potential stadium games, it means that machines with combat capabilities might outperform stars focused on racing, and this is where Air Ride kinda clicks into place. While this is not a universal truth, machines that aren't as desirable in races might be better in City Trial. In competition, the Shadow Star's higher offense stat makes it ideal for destruction during the patch collecting phase, though its own low health and defense make it a bit of a glass cannon compared to bulkier stars like the wagon. Many players will pick the wagon if they want to focus on stat collection, since without a lot of offense patches, killing a wagon is very hard. The Swerve Star is pretty good in races, but it is busted for City Trial, as the compounding stats turn it into a machine that's so maneuverable it's almost impossible to kill, while also having such a high top speed that it can often ram straight into someone and nearly kill them. It was balanced in the air ride mode by having only an average top speed, but when you can unlock its top speed and send it into the stratosphere, suddenly it's a good pick for any stadium match. Likely why it's banned in the competitive format. Yeah, there's a competitive format for City Trial, by the way. City Trial is often chaotic in the format most people will play it under. It is deliberately designed to be that way. I don't think it's possible to have this mode exist without someone inevitably breaking away from the rest of the pack. If you get on the Swerve Star, end up maxing out your top speed stat, and the stadium match lands on a drag race or something, you're probably just gonna win. Conversely, using a bricked up wagon for Demolition Derby will turn you into an absolute powerhouse. The ability to kill opponents and set them back super far is partly what makes it work so well. It almost doesn't matter how well someone stat collects if they run into a Gordo and lose it all. The legendary machine parts hidden in red boxes around the map are also game changers. You might not have had great patch collecting luck the whole match, but if you collect all the Dragoon parts and the stadium match rolls air glider, suddenly you've won the whole thing right out from under everyone. It's a mode full of huge swings and devastating losses, where almost anything can happen. I guarantee you gather up a group of friends, get everyone fucked up, and turn on City Trial, you're in for a roller coaster. I have so many memories with this mode. That same friend I mentioned who played Superstar Ultra with me also played a ton of Air Ride with me, and as much fun as we had with the main mode, something about Free Run was enchanting to us. We loved having the ability to pick any of the machines we wanted and just ride around everywhere. There are spots on the map you can explore on land to find hidden flowers, and we'd sort of sit and marvel at the little details hidden everywhere. Kirby games are about dreams, to some extent, but they're always grounded in a kind of reality. Popstar is fantastical, but there's a familiarity to it. There's a sky, there's ground, there are trees, and there's an ocean. Air Ride is more transient. Its courses exist in their own little bubbles. It isn't clear where we are or how we got there. You're just left to soak in the vibes of a floating tundra with a sky whale. I kinda wish I could get off my machine in Air Ride's Free Run and just hang out. These would probably make for good VR chat hangout spots. I wonder if that exists already. I think this is where Top Ride finally slots into the conversation. This mode doesn't have a whole lot to do with the others on the surface. It kinda controls the same, but it's pared down. Here it's more about perfecting your turn angles and cutting seconds off your time, while also chucking even more disruptive items at your friends. It's a miniaturized version of the Air Ride mode, where everyone is on more or less an equal playing field. The top-down camera is really cute. It sort of feels like you're peering over a foosball table. Every track has its own little bibs and bobs to mess with. Bumping into the volcanoes will spread lava around. If you fall in this quicksand pit, you'll get eaten by a plant monster. Bump into these vines and bombs will spit out. It's a short burst of hectic racing, where you have a much better idea as to what's happening around you at all times. It's interesting, as this is a mode which strips out the complexity of the other two. You get to choose between a star you direct with the stick, or one with tank controls, and that's it. Otherwise, it's about using the drift controls to bank tight turns, and I think there's something to be said about how fun that is across all modes. There's nothing quite like the feeling of successfully maneuvering Kirby, no matter what you find yourself doing. Whether it's to cut a really wide turn in Air Ride, to do a quick UE for some patches in City Trial, or to dart around Top Ride. This base control scheme, the one most people make fun of, even those of us who love the game, is the shared trait of every mode. It is the building block of Air Ride, and it's able to use its modes to go so much farther with the concept than you could ever imagine. Beyond the nuances of the machines, the complexities of the different stats, and the ways you can improve as a player, Kirby Air Ride will always be a fun game at its core for everyone of all skill levels. It has a degree of baked-in chaos that'll level the playing field, and a bunch of fun toys to mess around with. For as much as it was criticized near release for not having much content compared to other racing games, for being far too simple, it's amusing to me that I have far more time attributed to this novel GameCube title than any Mario Kart ever released. It was an excellent bow from Sakurai as he left the franchise to avoid the pressures inherent to making constant sequels. Hell of a way to go out. The crazy part is, It is nowhere near what it could be. These days, I like to be content with what I have. I take things as they are, rather than how I want them to appear. I live in the present moment as much as humanly possible. That is true of Air Ride. I will always adore this game as it currently exists, warts and all. Yet, as soon as it was announced that there would be a sequel to Air Ride, my imagination went into overdrive. Imagine more tracks, more machines, more stadium matches, more city trial hubs, more characters, more incredible music. Hell, even just the prospect of getting more Top Ride, or maybe even a new set of modes, which play off the core concept in a clever way. The possibilities are endless. And to have it all with online play that isn't through janky Dolphin net play, I will not be normal this year. I am fiending for more Air Ride. It's selfish, I know, but please, inject that shit into my veins, Sakurai. Touch me in all the right places.
You say good morning, I say good night. Such a wonderful day when the sunlight came. Out rose the rain.
Now you can use your finger to keep Kirby on the right path and out of trouble. Kirby Canvas Curse for Nintendo DS. Rated E for everyone.
The conversation around hardware gimmicks is a fascinating one. There's an instinctive revulsion toward games which use a lot of motion controls or touch controls. They are seen as unintuitive and obtuse in a way that a traditional controller isn't. For a long time, I agreed with this notion. I didn't think there was any worthwhile reason to use motion controls beyond their ability to emulate a mouse for aiming. Part of that can be attributed to how shallow their use was in the Wii days, with most games shoving them in as a cute novelty alongside more traditionally crafted experiences. Metroid Prime 3 and Twilight Princess worked with a Wiimote when you were able to use it for aiming your weapons, not when you simply had to wag the stick back and forth. Games like these are where waggle earned its negative connotation. Unfortunately, this conversation tends to overshadow games which use their hardware gimmicks in more inventive ways. Kirby Canvas Curse was one of the earliest to do this with touch controls on the DS, and it's one I hear very few people talk about. In this title, Kirby rolls automatically, and you have to guide him by drawing lines for him to roll across. Tapping him will give him a dash, and tapping enemies will stun them for a bit. It's a surprisingly difficult premise to come to grips with. Your limited paint means you'll have to be intentional with the paths you draw, remaining mindful of obstacles and bottomless pits. For those of us who play games often, it's easy to get wrapped up in how familiar we are with standardized button layouts. Skills between games are often transferable to make getting into them as easy as possible. Give someone a platformer who's barely played them, and I think you'll instantly pick up on that knowledge gap. Playing a game like Canvas Curse is the closest I've come to feeling like I've never played a video game before. And even the first few levels, getting used to how the game worked meant I was bumbling around, running into obstacles that were clear as day, and losing a lot of lives. Watching my footage back, you'd assume I was a novice, but that's part of the allure of gimmicky games like this for me. I've played so many video games that it is very rare to find myself in a position where I'm out of my element. Games like Canvas Curse are humbling, as they clearly display how much more games can be if we're willing to break free of common sense convention. The difficulty of Canvas Curse is not about jumping from platform to platform, it's about keeping control over where Kirby goes, like guiding a marble to and fro. Your lines need to curve like ramps or duck below ceilings as to not get Kirby stuck. Since Kirby will roll forward in whatever direction he faces, bonking against walls can see him fly in the other direction, forcing you to course correct him. This is hard to manage when there are enemies everywhere, or in auto-scrollers where it's impossible to make him come to a complete stop. Getting crushed to death is more of a concern here than it has ever been in a Kirby game, despite most of them having sections where you're supposed to be crushed to death. It's the kind of game that makes me question how much of Kirby's trademark easy difficulty has more to do with how experienced many of us are with platformers. Growing up with his games, I was not nearly as good at them as I am today. One could say my gaming literacy was simply not up to snuff, and so I have a memory of struggling with even some of the easiest Kirby titles. Canvas Curse is not afraid to test the limits of what its mechanics can do. Underwater levels flip its own controls by forcing Kirby to rise to the surface. You need to create lines above him to stop him from rising. And even just a cute little twist like that messed with my head so much that these levels were easily the hardest. I still don't really believe I've fully wrapped my head around everything it has to offer. I routinely forgot that I can draw lines while using the stone ability, making it more cumbersome on myself than it really should have been. It should feel like second nature that you'd want to draw lines for Wheel to follow, but owing to my familiarity with previous Kirby knowledge, I usually followed the level design as it currently stood. This got me into a lot of trouble in levels where they clearly expect you to draw paths. Once upon a time, I would have found this kind of design immensely frustrating and given up on it. These days, I tend to value how satisfying it is to guide Kirby through a level successfully. That journey might have a ton of pitfalls, but I can feel myself learning more and more every attempt. I'd likely spend more time with it if my gigantic hands didn't cramp up after an hour or two. I've only got the regular 3DS capture card, and it has a nearly broken battery, which means it needs to be plugged into both my computer and the wall while I'm playing. I'm practically hunched over in my office chair to get footage, and that's a harrowing experience for a man who is 6'6". I adore that every level's based on a different genre of painting. You've got some Van Gogh, Munch, and Picasso, to name a few. They pack so many little details into the background paintings, it's fun to marvel at in between the cacophony of obstacles. Canvas Curse doesn't really light the world on fire, but it's clearly not trying to. I think one of the reasons Kirby games are considered mid is that they usually aren't trying to be anything more than they are. They're games aimed at children, with hidden depth to exploit by those who are more experienced. Making a ton of smaller spin-offs focused on bizarre central ideas is a smart way to keep making games. Kirby Mass Attack was born of a similar desire. Here you control 10 different Kirbys to fight enemies and push blocks. It reminds me a little of Pikmin, where the little Kirbys have their own personality. It's frustrating to corral them together, and occasionally they don't even do what you want them to. Rushing into rooms without hesitation may also lead to a mass extinction event, encouraging caution in a similar way to Canvas Curse. Every world you begin with a single Kirby and need to build up your army by eating food. Levels require more and more of them for you to even enter, which makes losing them feel horrible. I really do wonder if the devs were inspired by Pikmin. It plays so similarly. Levels revolve around various gimmicks like moving platforms, spiders that steal your Kirbys, and screen-clearing sandstorms. Compared to Canvas Curse, its novelty begins to wear thin a little quicker. The amount of gimmicks which rely on you waiting around for stuff to happen is much more common. One of the things that made Canvas Curse work so well for me is how it doesn't overstay its welcome. It gets just enough mileage out of its level concepts. Mass Attack's core concept is a little closer to a typical Kirby platformer, which I think limits the ways in which levels can be designed. I lost count of how often I was asked to continually flick my Kirbys to push something across the screen. Going after all the medals was a tad more fulfilling than Canvas Curse though, as the act of collection itself is intrinsically rewarding. I love how Kirby gobbles up all the food, filling up that bar on the top screen. It's fun to see how many more times I can fill it up past the 10 Kirby limit for tons of points. Levels are more numerous in Mass Attack, but also much shorter, with little skips midway that allow you to warp to the end if there are a few early medals you wanted to grab. I almost never wanted to go back for medals in Canvas Curse, since its courses were an ordeal. Once I was finished, I was not in the mood to start them up again. Especially later on, these levels become torturous, which was manageable for a basic run, and not much more. Mass Attack has almost the opposite problem, where there really isn't much going on in these levels until you start poking around in them for medals. Those medals unlock a lot more too, including some of the best sub-games the series has to offer. Canvas Curse's sub-games are also its boss fights, which just a little random. Breakout against Krakow and line-drawing gourmet race are fun distractions, but they don't really resemble what I'd imagine as a boss fight in the same way the final bout against Drossia does. Mass Attack has more traditional boss fights, leaving its sub-games to focus on other ideas instead. There are simpler ones like Whack-A-Mole and count the amount of Kirbys on screen, but the beefier modes could probably have been spun off into their own releases. Kirby's Brawl Ball is a pinball minigame with 4 bosses to defeat that's more fun than the actual pinball game they released for the Game Boy. Kirby's Quest is essentially Megaton Punch, but set up as an RPG where you collect more Kirbys like the main mode and watch a ton of references to previous games. The best one, though, is easily Kirby Strato Patrol EOS, which is a 20-minute long bullet hell with Nightmare as the final boss. This one doesn't really pull its punches either, with some surprisingly tricky patterns to weave you and your other Kirbys through. Each additional Kirby increases your firepower, but they also lag behind you, so you need to kinda lead them between shots much earlier to avoid getting hit. Subgames are probably the reason I'm so okay with the franchise making strange spin-offs like these. Kirby, for me, is a bastion of creativity. It seems like there is no idea off limits, and even the strangest concepts will eventually get fleshed out enough to be their own projects. Kirby Canvas Curse and Mass Attack both feel like they could have been subgames in more traditional platformers. I wouldn't be surprised if they started as smaller ideas, but the teams behind them were passionate enough to follow those ideas to their logical conclusions. I think we easily could have seen a Kirby Bullet Hell on the DS, and I sorta hope we do in the future. He will always be a platformer at heart, but I think he has successfully wrenched himself away from that as a strict typecast, and partially thanks to this more experimental period of games, can essentially do anything he wants now and surprise virtually no one. These touch-based Kirby games are nostalgic for me, which is strange, as I haven't played them before recently. They simply could not have been made without the features of the DS, and it gets me thinking more about the out-there concepts Nintendo used to be married to, for better or worse. Even if that period of time is long gone, part of me hopes Kirby can be the franchise to continue experimenting. Audiences be damned.
Kirby's not just yarn. He's a tank. And Kirby's not just a tank, he's a car, a sub, a flying saucer, and more. Kirby's Epic Yarn.
Kirby's Epic Yarn is a game for babies. You're going to hear those words as an insult, which I find a little curious. I don't dislike Kirby's Epic Yarn. I actually think it's pretty cool. There's an impressive commitment here to the yarn aesthetic. Every single element is made out of a fabric, and it feels really good to rip open the walls. Each level is a patchwork quilt of colors, mimicking a standard Kirby biome. And it's fun to see the various ways yarn is used to approximate volcanoes and seafloors. It's cute enough to potentially distract from how maddeningly simple the platforming is. Kirby is a franchise designed from the jump to lean more elementary in its platforming. Sakurai designed Dreamland with an infinite jump for that very purpose. I would hesitate to call most Kirby games easy to master. Each new copy ability introduced to the series added a new way to platform or fight bosses. Those bosses would become a little more complex over time, and I think there's an argument to be made that the franchise has grown up just a little bit with its players, while still maintaining its introductory platformer identity. It's why I still enjoy them. Even considering that context, Kirby's Epic Yarn might be the easiest game in the franchise. You cannot die and there are no copy abilities. As such, there are no opportunities for levels to require you to burn a cannon fuse or break through special blocks. Instead, you're looking for special objects to interact with that are more or less on your progression path anyway. Touch damage has also been removed, meaning enemies need weapons to hit you. Kirby deaths usually happen as a result of more confined spaces with enemies you need to navigate past. Their behavior's a bit erratic, so you'd gradually accumulate damage that could culminate in a few deaths. Epic Yarn does not have this same sense of danger, with wide open levels that you can blitz through with very little thought. The biggest punishment is having your shiny beads fly all over the screen, which you can pick up again. Really, the occasional bottomless pit is the only true punishment for a misplay, as your beads will drop into the pit. It's worth noting that you cannot fly in Epic Yarn. Instead, you're given a cute glide where you turn into a parachute. That does make platforming more difficult by technicality, but it hardly matters when your jump lasts so long and the platforms in question are so big. I've been playing games for a long time. I consider myself pretty decent at them. That has not stopped me from enjoying Kirby games, even when they do tend towards simplicity. Playing Epic Yarn, I wouldn't say I was having a bad time, but I did find my eyes glazing over a little at the end of footage gathering sessions. I do not consider myself above anything. I'll watch John Wick brutally murder trillions in the same week I play another Pokemon game. Yet Kirby's Epic Yarn instills in me a creeping sense that it was not made for me. Maybe when I was still at the age where I couldn't get enough of Blue's Clues, this would have been a more fulfilling game, but it simply does not have that effect on me at 27 years old. I would not call this game mid for not rising to the level of challenge I crave. If I had a child, I'd love to let him play this. The cutscenes have a similarly playful energy to shows like Dora or Blue's Clues, right down to there being a plucky narrator speaking with the same kind of tone you'd use to speak to a toddler. In fact, as far as kids' games go, I'd struggle to find a platformer more suited to introducing them to the medium. It's bright and colorful, the yarn theming grounds it in our reality, giving them references for the kinds of crafts they'll be making in school. The music is full of lighter pieces with a much slower tempo, giving it a very welcoming vibe. The transformation segments get a little bumpier, transforming Kirby into a fire truck or a train or a car. Objects kids will also be really fascinated by and can easily grasp the mechanics of. Ironically, maybe the most uninviting thing about it is its co-op multiplayer features. Another player can join the fun, but it comes with a host of limitations. You cannot pass through each other, limiting the space you can both take up at once. The camera also needs to follow both of you, meaning it will prioritize one over the other in a puzzling way, which does not pair well with its tall levels. On top of that, you both share the bead count, meaning there's another point of failure for your shared collection count. These factors mix into a hilarious disaster. I had my fiancé play a few levels with me in co-op, and unfortunately, the wedding's been called off. We'd get stuck by the awkward camera all the time. We'd accidentally pick each other up when we're trying to interact with the level. It was a nightmare. Look at what happens to us during this dinosaur level. When you fall off, you're supposed to ride the current back to the start to try again, and the camera will prioritize one player. The dinosaur starts moving almost as soon as one of the players touches it, meaning one would inevitably get left behind, causing this loop of misfortune where we'd have to try this relatively simple section over and over again. I do not think we've laughed so hard playing a game in a long time. It was kinda incredible. I mean, hey, as seen with Amazing Mirror, all I needed was to boot this one up with another person to unlock its hidden depth. An accepted truth in video game discourse is that all games are working towards the same goals. They've got to be more difficult, more complex, just more. There isn't room for games which don't rise to meet that ever-growing, ever-changing threshold. As such, there can be no video games which appeal to younger age groups or are generally more inviting to those who might not be as familiar with the genre. Kirby's Epic Yarn doesn't appeal to me as a seasoned player of games. That doesn't upset me. Let the babies have their fun. Hell, let the game's fans have their fun. I'm not out here to claim everyone who likes the game is a baby. I'll still gladly go back to experience stuff from my childhood. Just so happens that not all of it'll speak to me like it once did. Not a kid anymore, after all. Maybe if I was, Epic Yarn would have stuck with me more.
and conquer. Mix, match, and make new abilities in Kirby's all-new adventure. It's Kirby Squeak Squad. Only for Nintendo DS. Rated E for everyone.
This is my final challenge. In my quest to find value in a sea of mid, we have come to Kirby Squeak Squad. Kirby Squeak Squad is most certainly a video game released for the Kirby franchise in the mid-2000s. I picked it as my first video, since it was a Kirby game I played a lot as a kid and almost never heard anyone talking about. 10 years later, and I can kinda understand why no one talks about it. It is the nebulous definition of a Kirby game. You run through a bunch of levels because Kirby wants his cake back. You fight DDD, then Meta Knight, and fly his halberd into space to kill an eldritch entity stuck in a treasure chest with a magic rod. It doesn't do anything novel or exciting. It just kinda exists. It's pretty fun. In theory, I like the idea of trying to steal the treasure chests from the Squeaks before they reach their base. They almost never put up enough of a challenge for it to work, but hey, cool idea. It uses a touch-based gimmick where you can store power-ups and the chests you pick up, leading to a little bit of inventory management. Had a few moments where I needed to clear out my inventory to pick up a big chest. Could be a bit frantic sometimes. For the most part, though, it is yet another Kirby game for the DS. Squeak Squad might be the reason this era of Kirby is viewed as mid in the first place. It's the poster child for it. It looks exactly like Kirby had looked for years at that point, plays similarly to Superstar, and introduces a few new copy abilities. Kirby can turn himself into a ball of metal now. It allows him to move incredibly slowly. Awesome. Animal is used to dig through dirt, I guess. It's also there to become really frustrating when you use the dash attack. Really had to make this attack last this long, huh? Bosses are complete pushovers. You can stun lock the Squeaks so easily that I'm surprised anyone thought they'd ever put up a fight. It's mid. Well and truly. But it's also become so much more. This is the video game that built my dream job. It's the reason I'm writing this right now. I had a desire to show off this cool Kirby game from my childhood that I never heard anyone talking about. In retrospect, I'm not sure I really did a very good job talking about why I liked it. Isn't it ironic, then, that 10 years later, I struggled to do the very same thing? These levels are bog standard Kirby fare. You run through, find secret entrances for chests, and pick up copy abilities. The music's relaxing, the game doesn't overstay its welcome, and despite looking exactly like the several games that came before, it's damn cute. Look at the outfit you get for Animal. The power-up's nothing special, but it endeared itself to me when I saw how fucking cute it was. The story is incredibly stupid, and that's why I love it so much. The idea that Kirby goes on a rampage after getting his strawberry shortcake stolen is funny. It gets even funnier the more the franchise leans into existential horror. Its level themes are engraved into my eardrums. They're all remixes from other Kirby games, but who really cares? I bop to them all the same, and I recognize them as coming from Squeak Squad's DS synths. They were my introduction to many of these tunes anyway. Maybe one of the reasons I'm drawn to Kirby is that it shuts down the part of my brain which yearns for the analytical. It doesn't do anything special or different or original, but I don't really care because it makes me smile. I played through Squeak Squad again for footage, and I had a good time. That was enough. I have played and written about a lot of video games over these 10 long years of doing YouTube. I have gone through many different transformations. My taste has significantly changed. I'm a wholly different person when I look in the mirror, and yet I still have an unexplainable fondness for this mid-Kirby game on the DS. Perhaps that is simply proof to me that mid is not a very useful term. It's born of this fear we all collectively share, that our interests need to be grand and complicated. We need to have special reasons to love what we love. We constantly compare and rank and mathematically plot the things we play to build ourselves into beings with immaculate taste in games that push the boundaries of art. There's just no room for mid. I'm kinda over that performance. I have fun with Squeak Squad because its ideas are a bit shallow. You can make a fire sword and ice bombs in a pale imitation of Kirby 64's copy system, and I enjoyed doing it anyway. It's fun to mix the bubbles around. Why? I refuse to explain it. It's fun. I don't have a reason. I don't need a reason. I like it. Can I be honest with y'all for a bit? For the 10 years I've been writing for this YouTube channel, exploring my thoughts on games, watching them evolve, I do not feel like I have come closer to any definitive truths. I have changed my opinions so many times. I love games I used to hate. I hate games I used to love. I've discovered new favorites and obsessed over strange bullshit. I've continually redefined and transformed what my writing even looks like, experimenting with video presentation and style in the hopes that I would eventually find myself, like all these other fantastic creators have. That I would one day escape the realm of mid. And here I am 10 years later, writing about how Kirby Squeak Squad's a fun platformer with nice music. You should go play it sometime. Or not. Doesn't really matter to me, I'm just here to share my perspective. You go back and read interviews for Squeak Squad, and the devs are simply happy that they made a game where Kirby can interact with the environment around him. It was never some colossal project. The team behind Squeak Squad did not set out to define Kirby or buck its trends. All they did was make a Kirby platformer. It's pretty good. That's the best I've got for Kirby Squeak Squad after 10 years of hindsight. Is it mid like all the rest? I'm sure someone thinks so. I like it. Like what you like. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter why it is. Express that love. Create something. Be true to yourself. Follow that thread. And instead of finding yourself, you'll come to realize that you were there all along. Over the 10 years that I have now been making YouTube videos, there was a lot I had to learn, and not all of it was obvious. To do this, you've got to learn how to write, how to edit, how audio works, and also how to manage a community. There is a lot of information I wish I had when I started this thing, and thankfully there are a bunch of videos out there now outlining the process so you can learn how to do it too. Jacob Geller's got a really great video about all the steps he takes to write his scripts, including the research he does and how he comes up with his ideas. Liam Triforce has one as well if he's more your speed, diving into where he draws his inspiration and a bit more of the nitty-gritty details. I recommend them both, and you can find them over on Nebula, a prestige streaming service with videos from the likes of Game Maker's Toolkit, Jacob Geller, Liam Triforce, Lindsay Ellis, Innuendo Studios, and so many more. It's a thought-provoking service full of so many interesting videos. These videos are of a high standard and professionally curated, so you'll be getting the best of the best over there. If you're gonna get lost on a binge session, might as well be with some of the best creators currently making stuff at the moment. I have some exclusive stuff of my own over there. Most recently I wrote a video about Sea of Stars and how the comparisons to Chrono Trigger do it a disservice. But I've also got a few others about Astrobot, Hi-Fi Rush, and Balatro if you're interested in hearing me talk about those as well. I'm pretty proud of those videos, and I am thankful to Nebula for giving me and my colleagues the opportunity to make cool stuff like this that wouldn't have existed otherwise. This creative freedom's infectious and has led to a broad catalog of more specialized works. Abolish Everything is a comedy based around the premise of arguing to abolish everyday items and concepts like Cybertrucks, airplanes, and maybe even the English language. It's a ton of fun. If you like roast-style comedies, this will be right up your alley, and it's simply one series Nebula has going at the moment. If you're looking to check out what the site has to offer, you can use my link below to check out my channel, which will have every video I release on YouTube, as well as my exclusive videos like my aforementioned video on Sea of Stars. Using my link, you'll get 40% off a yearly plan, which shakes out to $36 a year or $3 a month. You could also choose a monthly plan at $6 a month, or go for a lifetime plan for $300. All of this using my link below. New paid subscribers also receive guest passes to give out to others, so if you end up loving it, you can invite friends and family to check it out free of charge. No credit card information required. And for those of you that want to share everything Nebula has to offer with your family and friends, Nebula is now offering annual gift cards. Use the link gift.nebula.tv/KingK to give a year of Nebula to a friend for just $36. I think you'll all really enjoy what Nebula has to offer if you give it an honest chance. It's a bright beacon of creative hope in an increasingly dark and stormy independent creator landscape. So go check it out now at nebula.tv/KingK, and I'll see you there.